Hello. Happy Wednesday. It's Wednesday. Everybody's like fifth favorite day. Hi Sharkies. How you doing? Fifth is probably not and is too mean. It's probably not fifth favorite. It's fourth favorite day. I think Wednesday is everybody's fourth favorite day, right? I think it goes Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Wednesday. Not necessarily in that specific order, but I think Wednesday pretty definitively comes after Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Of course, there are exceptions. You know, like if you work weekends or something, then you may not. It's Mrs. Sharky's Friday, so drinking caffeine at 7 p.m. Bonkers. Farmo says that my assessment seems accurate. Living I know that's a typo, obviously, living dangerously, but living dangerously. Living dangerously. I like it better. Parmo says too much caffeine. It's gone from dangerous to dangeropolis. Dangeroposal. Oh, I'm a little tired and I've got a little bit of a headache, but had a good day. We visited with our friend Mr. Chip Alex, whose stream you may have seen me raid out to before. We went out for pho for lunch, and then we took the pupper for a walk around the park and the neighborhood in the nice sunlight. It was a little breezy, so it wasn't super warm. It was still somewhat warm, but it was that like strange mix of both warm and chilly, where it's sunny but breezy. So you're like, I can feel the warmth from the sunlight, but I can also feel a little bit of a chill from the breeze. Strange mix. Um, yeah, and as Farmo says, it's light out and it's after 7. Yeah, look at that, right there. Look at that light. Wow. This is a window. This glowy patch here. Also, all these reflections over here. You can see, yeah, just reflection of my finger in the reflection. Reflection. um, my Nibbling and their dog have returned to their home, so no more guest dog. But but we still have Binabic. We still have Binabic. Yeah, second time's the charm. There he is. There's the good puppy. Binnick Theodore Good Puppy, aka Binabic the Good Puppy. The is short for Theodore, right? Binabic the Good Puppy. Kids were taking turns running with a pup today. Oh, that's adorable. What kind of pup? Oh, is your imaging next week, Farmos? Oh, it's coming up faster. Yeah, I guess you said it was on like the 6th or something, right? I'm not entirely ready for it to be April yet, but that is the day after tomorrow is April. A papillon. They're very cute. There was a period of time where I wanted one. Um, the big, the big butterfly ears. but that period of time passed for some reason. Now I want a corgi. And I got a corgi, kinda. Ben's like corgi-ish. We think he's probably part corgi. A floofy, pretty dog. He's better. He's very cute. I'm looking over here because I can see him on my monitor. My monitor is here, and then my camera is here. Well, my monitor kind of goes from here to here, and that's why I'm looking over this way a lot of the time, as I'm sure everybody is aware. Best dog. He is best dog. You hear that? You're best dog. You won. You won best dog. Good job. And you plan to play D&D on Saturday. Pretty big fight. Ooh. We are also going to be playing D&D soon. Let's see. It won't be this Saturday, it'll be the Saturday after. So we will be playing D&D a week after you are playing D&D. Campaign finisher either way. Bittersweet. I hope it goes well. How do you plan on... I mean, you don't have to answer here because Mr. Sharky is the one running the game, right? But have you thought about how to actually wrap up everybody's individual stories? I'm kind of a fan of the, like, self-narrated epilogue. Like, everyone kind of gets to explain what their characters do in the future. What they do after the adventure ends. He says it's ready to play a new character. Current one is lawful good, and I miss stealing things. I don't know if I've ever really played a full Thiefy McThieferson. I had one character that was kind of an infiltrator, but he didn't really actually do that much stealing unless it was kind of, you know, quest important. Mr. is leaving it open as far as wrapping up the characters. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like more of my characters tend to be good leaning than otherwise. Yeah, in one game I played back in 3.5, there was this class that came out in like the Player's Handbook 2 or something called Beguiler. And that character was a lot of fun. I liked the character, but the class was tricky because it was a class that was very good at doing things on their own, but I feel like did not work very well as part of a team. Like, I felt like the class was very good at, like, sneaking into anywhere and getting all of the information and maybe mind controlling some people along the way, and then getting out on their own. But I felt like they didn't work great as part of a team, so I ended up swapping characters twice in that game. Sharky say, current paladin was a fun exercise when me as a player would want something, but the character does something else. But I want more room for choices. I mean, yeah, like that's going to boil down to the character, I feel, more so than the class in 5th, because 5th doesn't really restrict you in alignment or, I mean, somewhat in behavior because you've got your vow as a paladin. So you have to adhere to the rules that your vow lays out. But you don't have to be lawful good to be a paladin in 5th. You don't have to be lawful or good. I have a paladin concept that I've been wanting to play for a while, but it just keeps kind of not happening one way or another. It's like paladin in class, like Oath of Vengeance, but I want to play the character as like a little bit of like a film noir PI sort of thing. Farmo says lawful characters in particular can be tricky. Frequently, you have what you would do laid out for you in your code. Mister's first tabletop character was a Pathfinder wizard elf, chaotic neutral named Feanor. Is it Feanor? The Unlikely. I played a wizard in 3.5 as well. That was a lot of fun. He was an old half dragon. Dragonborn, I think, weren't really as much of a thing at that point. I don't know whether they had been published or not, but half dragons were a thing, and it was more of like a template. So he was half elf, half dragon. But he was very old and crotchety, and that was fun. Yeah, the professor. Mrs. Paladin is lawful good, oath of vengeance, getting justice for being left at the altar. What kind of altar? This is D&D we're talking about. That could mean any number of things. But has killed ex-fiance. Oh, okay. So that settles that. So I was thinking, like, it could be, yeah, it could, wedding altar, but it could also be like sacrificial altar. Which would be another reason to be an oath of vengeance. Oath of vengeance for being stood up, huh? I'm guessing that there's a little bit more to that story than just. I don't think most lawful good characters would kill someone for leaving them at the wedding altar. So I'm guessing there's more to that story. Oh, so how about this book, huh? How about that last chapter? That was that was something, wasn't it? There's a lot to unpack from that chapter. I feel like there were enough big events in that chapter that I forgot to talk about some of them last time. Because we got like the really big thing, Garion slapping Asherak to death. Kind of undersells it when I put it like that, doesn't it? Ex-fiance was involved in the big bad's rise to power. There it goes. Yeah. Farmer says fire slaps. So we had that. I'm gonna have to like kind of skim over this chapter to get everything. Of course, they split the party. And it's funny how I was trying to say that splitting the party isn't always a bad idea. But then, bam, they split the party, and it turns out Asherak was waiting for that to happen. Or Chamdar. Duke Kador reveals himself to be evil. It's spelled with a K, but yes. Sharky say was meant to be in the final battle, but they roasted him and his cultist followers. Oh boy. I would say he was pretty evil. I think that Kador was pretty definitively evil. Like, wanted to straight up murder the princess, was taking copious amounts of Murgo gold to, essentially just sell them people. I think Grand Duke Kador was pretty evil. Technically, as far as we're aware, is evil because he didn't actually get killed. He got carted off to see the Emperor. Yeah. So Silk and Belgarath split off, and that was an opening that Chamdar was waiting for. Mandaralan revealed his fear of the Claymen and felt pretty vulnerable about that. We had a pretty big talk about that. Queen Xantha's tree kind of tried to warn Garion a little bit, which Queen Xantha seemed a little surprised by, but they didn't really go into any detail about why. And then the part that I was thinking that we actually didn't talk about was that. Oh, I'm missing some chat here. Let's see. Sharkies thought it was interesting that Pol called Garion by his full name, by Belgarion, in exultation, but then was like, that was all me, and everyone was okay with that or didn't notice. That was all in his head, right? Like, you picked up on that. She was speaking to him in his mind. So that's why nobody, like, if you're wondering why nobody noticed her being like, my Belgarion, that's because that was all internal monologue, or dialogue, internal dialogue. Yeah, it maybe if you were just following me, it was sort of talked about how like it mentioned that it was in his mind, but it might not have been super clear if you weren't reading it in the book because it's all in italics and that's how they kind of distinguish. It seems to be, as far as I can tell, if it's in italics and it's in quotation marks, then it's mental speak. And if it's in italics and it's not in quotation marks, I think, then it's the hidden language. But I'm not 100% certain that the hidden, or the secret tongue, secret language is not in quotation marks. It may or may not be. And I'm not going to be able to find it super easily, an example, so I'll check that next time. But yes, it's probably a little bit more clear in text that that was all mental. Yeah, she was very happy with him for doing what he did, but she still didn't want to reveal it to everyone. Mrs. prefers just to listen to me read, but Mr. reads along. Yeah, that's fair. I get what you mean. I also have I kind of pause so that I can read ahead briefly while I'm doing this. So because lots of times I've got to figure out who it is that's speaking, and I've still gotten that wrong once or twice. But yeah, so that probably makes it easier for other people to read ahead as well. But yeah, one thing that we didn't really talk about at all because I think there were so many other momentous things taking place, but Garion actually spoke directly to that dry voice in his mind. We've seen kind of references to that a number of times. It was unclear whether that was just a part of Garion that maybe was a little bit more mature about certain things or something like that, or maybe more like cynical or realistic or something. Um, because, there's been like the dry voice in his mind told him that this was foolish or something like that, right? But this time it was actually Garion speaking to this dry voice as if it were someone else, and that dry voice responding and also showing Garion how to do something that he didn't otherwise know how to do. Garion still did it himself, but he was shown how to do it. So, I think that's pretty definitive that the dry voice in Garion's mind is not just Garion. To me, that, if just from reading this chapter, that's what I would come up with, I think. Um, Yeah, like, you did it, he accused the dry awareness in one corner of his mind. No, the voice replied, the dry awareness. No, the voice replied, I only showed you how. The will and the word and the touch were all yours. Sharky says, picturing the river spirit from Spirited Away, but of course it wouldn't be that creepy. Which one's the river right from Spirited Away? The dragon? Wasn't the river spirit the dragon? They thought it was a stink spirit. Oh. Oh, right. You're talking about before it got cleaned? Was that a river spirit? Because I remember... Were there two river spirits? But yes, okay. That's an interesting... What does it look like after it gets washed off? Does it get kind of like an old man face? Skeletal face? You know, I don't know if I've ever really thought to try and put a face to this dry voice at this point. But yeah, so I think that's a lot of... I think that mostly covers where we're at. Garion's very upset. The chapter ended with him weeping. Sinedra's very upset. She was also weeping somewhere in there. And now, part 3. Nyssa. A little bit out of focus there, but that's fine. So, of course, the new part starts with a new map. Let's see what we got here. So Nyssa is to the south of Tolnedra, as we've been over before, and also directly to the west of Ctholmurgos. It looks like the capital, Sthis-Tor, is pretty central, unlike Arendia. Of course, right beside a river. Oh boy. Yeah, we've got jungles of the snake people. Swamps, 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 swamps. How many times does it say swamps on here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 swamps. Let's bring this up here. Well, this way a little bit. It's a little fuzzy, but yeah, we've got 5 sets of swamps just all around. I think basically the entire country is swamps. Swamps and jungles. This big black spot in the middle is this store. Sharky say, so basically fantasy Florida. Does Florida have jungles of the snake people? Probably. We've got a few different ruins in there. And one notable thing, along the river here, there's another line that runs like right beside the river that follows it that is labeled Northern Slave Route. So that's nice. If you didn't already despise the Nissans and the Murgos, apparently they've got a nice slave trade going between them. There's one ruin in here that's, I think, actually got a name, but I can't make it out. It's kind of obscured, like mixed in with some trees. But other than that, it's like, and it might not even be named. But realistically, the only named things in here. We've got jungles of the snake people, swamp, 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 swamps, ruin, 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 uh, northern slave route, and Sthis-Tor. It is not quite as many settlements labeled as most of the other maps. The only actual labeled settlement is Sthis-Tor. Yeah. Oh, and it's also, I guess, Marag or Mara has kind of just been absorbed by Tolnidra, because there's a section in the Tolnidra map that's labeled District of the Marags and Marterin, which is where those monks came from. Sharky say slavery is an easy kick the dog characteristic of an evil country. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's something that people do, right? It's not, unfortunately, it's not a fantasy setting thing where you say, ah, they have slaves, they're evil. It's just it's something that exists in fantasy, but sadly, something that exists in the real world as well, or has existed. Let's be real, exists. Look at the American prison system. Oh. I made myself sad. These lights, I set the lights to be green, but I don't know if they're going to be bright enough all being green. I might need to adjust them slightly. Maybe switch one of them to white. That is... that should give me enough to read by. Turkey say, but in fantasy, it doesn't mean the author. In fantasy, it means the author doesn't want the reader to have any chance of immediately liking that country. Trying to think if I have seen in anime, I've seen some fantasy settings where a country has had slavery but not been completely immoral, like irredeemably immoral, where they've had slavery but also, like in Death March to the Parallel World Rhapsody, the country that the main character kind of finds himself in to begin with, has slavery, but is overall mostly a good country, and I think is like working towards getting better rights for slaves. Pharma says Terry Pratchett has done it, but you're supposed to think it's evil first. Sharky say, I suppose alternative history Rome doesn't necessarily have the same evil association. I was thinking about, again, because just talking about what book we might read next, and I was sort of just thinking about if I would ever want to read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn on stream. And I'm like, just thinking to myself, like, no, there are sections of that book that I would not want to read out loud. And one of them is, there is an evil character that quite early on kills a dog. In like an extreme over the top, kick the dog type of way. It's literally like, let's take kick the dog but make it worse. And I'm like, no, I don't even want to read that part. I think the last time I read those books, I actually just skipped that paragraph. And if I were gonna if for some reason I was reading those books, like I do like those books a lot. Obviously, I like those books a lot. But if I were going to, for some reason, like actually read them on stream, I think I would have to just stop and go, okay, this is a part I'm not going to read out loud like the way it's written, but basically what happens is this, this is what happens. Because I don't think I could do that. It's, There are other parts of those books that I'd be pretty uncomfortable to read out loud as well. Not anything. Yeah, I don't know. It's been a while, so I don't remember every specific part, like how it all plays out. DoesTheDogDie.com. Sharky says, yes. Tells someone if there's traumatizing moments in media. Yes. Yeah, and that is, like you said, traumatizing moments. You can look up just various triggers and things like that. It's not just if the dog dies. Yeah, I've heard of that one. I haven't. Sharky say, works for movies, TV, books, though crowdsourced, so not exhaustive. I haven't actually gone and, used it myself because generally I don't think I'm watching many things that I expect to have something to bother me too extremely. And I don't have I don't have really any severe triggers, I don't think. At least none that I've thoroughly encountered. Anyways, so we're on part 3, chapter 23, on page 253. In my book, it's a lot of 3s lining up. 253 out of 322. So we are getting real close. Like 69 pages to go, something like that. And Pharma says, ooh, many 3s. Sharky say, does the dog die has less common ones too? Does someone's teeth fall out, etc.? Yeah, a lot of 3s. There's a dog, speaking of dogs, there's a dog barking outside right now. Yeah, so it's 7:33. So let's oh, yeah, still 7:33. I thought it ticked over, but it didn't. So let's get to chapter 23 on page 253, part 3. Only book 2. Pharma says, Ben did a little growly boof, so he heard it. He's upset that I keep mentioning dogs dying. It's okay, Ben. It's all fiction. All right. Chapter 23. This starts off with a sentence that I'm immediately going to want to talk about, but the earth was still the same. The trees had not changed, nor had the sky. It was still spring, for the seasons had not altered their stately march. But for Garion, nothing would ever again be the way that it had been. That first sentence, the earth was still the same. That's something that I find always a little odd in fantasy novels that are not set on Earth when they refer to Earth. Now, is it talking about the world? Is it talking about the dirt? Because that's always a little confusing that we named our planet Dirt. If it's talking about the ground, the dirt, then that kind of raises the question a little bit of which name came first, the dirt or the planet. And if it's talking about the world, well, I doubt that, I guess we don't know what the name of their world is, but it'd be a little strange. That's something that's interesting about Tolkien specifically, is Middle Earth. But I doubt that this world is named Earth. It might be, but usually in fantasy novels they like to come up with some other name. Um, I can't even tell whether it's capitalized or not because the entire sentence is capitalized. Of course, it doesn't want to focus, but there it is. As you can see, that one sentence is entirely capitalized. I don't think it is because I don't know. It's hard to tell. The T on the at the beginning is larger, so maybe yeah. Maybe it's probably just talking about the dirt. It's probably just the dirt was still the same, I guess. That has a little less impact to me. And now, of course, I'm out of focus. Whatever. No, it's gonna bother me. I gotta fix it. It's gonna bother me. I tried to brush it off, but I'm here. I'm fuzzy. I want to be clear. I'm here and I want to be clear. I don't want to co-opt someone else's rhyme. Whatever. It'll probably focus on its own eventually. Sharkies also think of Earth as the substance and the place are the same thing to a prehistoric society, and more nuanced differences grow from there. It's an interesting thought. To a prehistoric society, huh? Well, anyways, but for Garion, nothing would ever again be the way that it had been. If we hadn't just been through the big chapter that we have been through, I would say, teen angst. I'd be hitting that teen angst button. Nothing's ever going to be the same. Why is it not focusing? But in Garion's defense, I'm not going to hit that teen angst button because I think he's kind of right. For him, like, that was a pretty big event that just took place. I think that it's probably not wrong to say nothing will ever again be the same. Even if he hadn't just killed someone for the first time, he also just used magic for the first time in a fairly large and traumatic way. Like if I discovered that I could use magic, even if it were, not so big and traumatic, I'd be like, hey, nothing's ever going to be the same. I can do magic now. Maybe I can learn 0 lessons from Fantasia, from the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and I can clean up my house with it or something. They rode down through the wood of the Dryads to the banks of the river of the woods, which marked the southern boundary of Tolnidra. Yep, there it is. Very large river. Of course, I'm not in focus at all here, so... Oh, but the map is. And it looks like the river is on the Tolnidra side of the border, which is interesting that the river is Tolnidran's definitively according to this map, and the border doesn't go down like the center of the river or something like that. No, the river is on Tolnidra's side, and then south of the river is Nyissa. I guess that's probably the result of another Tolnidran treaty. They probably, it's one of those squeezing out every last bit they can type of things. All right. Sharky say conquering empires get possessive like that. Let's see. The banks of the River of the Woods, which marked the southern boundary of Tolnidra, and from time to time, as they rode, he caught strange glances from his friends. The looks were speculative, thoughtful, and Dernick, good, solid Dernick, behaved as if he were almost afraid. Only Aunt Pole seemed unchanged, unconcerned. "Don't worry about it, Belgarion," her voice murmured in his mind. "Don't call me that," he replied with an irritated thought. "It's your name," the silent voice said. "You might as well get used to it." Leave me alone. And then the sense of her presence in his mind was gone. Pharmo says, yeah, back before it was known that we were on a thing like the other planets, I think it was thought that the whole thing was made up of Earth. It took them several days to reach the sea. Did they get on a boat? I know that they were planning to. Or maybe the boat's at the sea. Right. The boat was going to wait for them at the mouth of the river, wasn't it? So I guess they got to the river and then they followed it to the sea. So they are going right here. It took them several days to reach the sea. The weather remained intermittently cloudy. Blah, why is that a mouthful right now? Intermittently cloudy. I'm going to say it as many times as I can. Though it did not rain. A stiff onshore breeze was blowing when they rowed out onto the wide beach at the mouth of the river. The surf boomed against the sand, and whitecaps flecked the tops of the waves. Out beyond the surf, a lean, black Cherokee warboat swung at anchor, the air above her alive with screeching gulls. Oh, it actually showed up. It even beat them there. With screeching gulls. Barak pulled his horse in and shaded his eyes.
She looks familiar,
he rumbled, peering intently at the narrow ship. Hetar shrugged. They all look the same to me.
There's all the difference in the world,
Barak said, sounding a bit injured.
How would you feel if I said that all horses looked the same?
I'd think that you were going blind. Barak grinned at him.
It's exactly the same thing,
he said. How do we let them know we're here? Darnick asked.
They know already,
Barak said.
Unless they're drunk. Sailors always watch an unfriendly shore very carefully.
Unfriendly? Darnick asked.
Every shore is unfriendly when a Cherokee warboat comes in sight,
Barak answered.
It's some kind of superstition, I think.
Why could that be? Why would every shore be unfriendly to a Cherokee warboat? Superstition, I guess. The ship came about, and her anchor was raised. I guess they weren't drunk. Her oars came out like long, spidery legs, and she seemed to walk through the froth-tipped combers toward the mouth of the river. Barak led the way toward the riverbank, then rowed along the broad flow until he found a spot deep enough so that the ship could be moored next to the shore. The fur-clad soldiers who threw Barak a mooring line looked familiar, and the first one who leaped across to the riverbank was Greldick, Barak's old friend.
You're a long ways south,
Barak said, as if they had only just parted. Greldick shrugged.
I heard you needed a ship. I wasn't doing anything, so I thought I'd come down and see what you were up to. Did you talk to my cousin?
Grinnig?
No. We made a run down from Kotu to the harbor at Tol Horb for some Drasnian merchants. I ran into Elteg. You remember him. Black beard, only one eye.
Barak nodded.
He told me that Grinnig was paying him to meet you here. I remembered that you and Elteg didn't get along very well, so I offered to come down instead. And he agreed? No, Greldick replied, pulling at his beard. As a matter of fact, he told me to mind my own business. I'm not surprised, Barak said. Elteg always was greedy, and Grinnig probably offered him a lot of money. More than likely, Greldick grinned. Elteg didn't say how much, though. How did you persuade him to change his mind? He had some trouble with his ship, Greldick said with a straight face. What kind of trouble? It seems that one night, after he and his crew were all drunk, some scoundrel slipped aboard and chopped down his mast. What's the world coming to? Barak asked, shaking his head. My thought exactly, Greldick agreed. How did he take it? Not very well, I'm afraid, Greldick said sadly. When we rowed out of the harbor, he sounded as if he was inventing profanities on the spot. You could hear him for quite some distance.
Greldick. You got it right, except there's a K on the end. Greldik.
He should learn to control his temper. That's the kind of behavior that gives Cherax a bad name in the ports of the world.
Greldick nodded soberly and turned to Aunt Pole.
My lady, he said with a polite bow, my ship is at your disposal.
Captain, she said, acknowledging his bow, how long will it take you to get us to this tour?
Depends on the weather,
he answered, squinting at the sky. Depends on the weather. Ah, yeah, it's clear.
Probably 10 days at the most. We picked up fodder for your horses on the way here, but we'll have to stop for water from time to time.
We'd better get started then, she said. Yeah, no G. There's no G. Well, there's one G. There's one G at the beginning. It's not just Reldick. Yes, the problem is that Elteg was swearing because some scoundrel chopped off his mast, making Cherax look bad. It took a bit of persuading to get the horses aboard the ship, but Hetar managed it without too much difficulty. Then they pushed away from the bank, crossed the bar at the mouth of the river, and reached the open sea. The crew raised the sails, and they quartered the wind down along the gray-green coastline of Nyssa. Garion went forward to his customary place in the bow of the ship, and sat there, staring bleakly out at the tossing sea. Teen angst. Also, I like that now sitting at the bow of the ship is his customary place. I guess, once you ride the Cherek boar at the bow of a ship, you get the right to call that your customary place. You've earned it at that point. The image of the burning man back in the forest filled his mind. There was a firm step behind him, and a faint, familiar fragrance. Do you want to talk about it? Aunt Pole asked. What's there to talk about? Many things, she told him. You knew I could do that kind of thing, didn't you? I suspected it, she said, sitting down beside him. There were several hints. One can never be sure, though, until it's used for the first time. I've known... Mine's got a comma here, but I feel like there should have been a period between until it's used for the first time and I've known. In my copy, there's a comma, but I feel like it should be a period. I've known any number of people who had the capability and just never used it. Sharky say, I suspected you were a flame slapper. Ah, yes, of the Sendarian flame slappers. I've known any number of people who had the capability and just never used it. I wish I never had, Garion said. I don't see that you really had much choice. Chamdar was your enemy. But did it have to be that way? He demanded. Did it have to be fire? The choice was yours, she answered. If fire bothers you so much, don't do it that way next time. There isn't going to be a next time, he stated flatly. Not ever. Belgarion, her voice snapped within his mind, stop this foolishness at once. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Feels a little out of character, doesn't it? Sharky say, we have a period after used for the first time. Quit that, he said aloud. Stay out of my mind, and don't call me Belgarion. You are Belgarion, she insisted. Like it or not, you will use the power again. Once it's been released, you can never cage it up. You'll get angry or frightened or excited, and you'll use it without even thinking. You can no more choose not to use it than you can choose not to use one of your hands. The important thing now is to teach you how to control it. We can't have you blundering through the world, uprooting trees and flattening hills with random thoughts. You must learn to control it and yourself. I didn't raise you to let you become a monster. It's too late, he said. I'm already a monster. Didn't you see what I did back there? This next part is in italics. All this self-pity is very tedious, Belgarion, her voice told him. It doesn't say in his mind, but I don't think we are getting anywhere. She stood up. Do try to grow up a little, dear, she said aloud. It's very hard to instruct someone who's so self-absorbed that he won't listen. Pole's not being the most sensitive in this chapter. I'll never do it again, he told her defiantly. Farmo says, even if it is his name, he's asked her not to call him that. He might get used to it, but he is trying to set a boundary, which she should really respect. Also, come on, Aunt Pole, he just killed a man for the first time. You were much more comforting when it happened to Dernick. The second part I agree with. The first part, I would agree with in our world. In their world, it has a certain meaning that is also tied up with the god Aldur. And she's like 6,000 or 5,000 years old, you know, or 4,000, somewhere in that range. So I'm not sure if the Bell part of his name would be considered as optional as it would be in our world. Like it's weird to consider religious aspects in a world where you can go and have a conversation face to face with your god. But yes, I do agree with the rest of your points. I'll never do it again, he told her defiantly. Oh, yes, you will, Belgarion. You'll learn and you'll practice and you'll develop the discipline this requires. This is all in italics again. If you don't want to do it willingly, then we'll have to do it the other way. Think about it, dear, and make up your mind. But don't take too long. It's too important to be put off. She reached out and gently touched his cheek. Then she turned and walked away. She's right, you know, the voice in his mind told him. You stay out of this, Garion said. All right, more voice in his mind. It's becoming a little more regular all of a sudden. Framos has got a big speech here. Right from the start of the series, it tells us he's a pawn in this, not that it makes it okay to be callous, but within the narrative, he's less able to self-identify than in the real world. He's just burned a man with his mind. That's not teen angst. That's not, I don't want to go to school today. He could use some compassion. And she's just like, get over it. Without showing him the less destructive, scary parts of magic. Excuse me. In the days that followed, he avoided Aunt Pole as much as possible. But he could not avoid her eyes. Wherever he went on the narrow ship, he knew that she was watching him, her eyes calm, speculative. Then, at breakfast on the third day out, she looked at his face rather closely, as if noticing something for the first time. Garion, she said, you're starting to look shaggy. Why don't you shave? Here we go. Changes. Garion blushed furiously and put his fingers to his chin. There were definitely whiskers there. Downy, soft, more like fuzz than bristles, but whiskers all the same. Thou art truly approaching manhood, young Garion, Manderalin assured him rather approvingly.
The decision doesn't have to be made immediately, Polgara,
Barak said, stroking his own luxuriant red beard.
Let the whiskers grow for a while. If they don't turn out well, he can always shave them off later.
I think your neutrality in the matter is suspect, Barak, Hetar remarked. Don't most Cheraks wear beards? Everybody's weighing in on the beard discussion.
No razors ever touched my face,
Barak admitted.
But I just don't think it's the sort of thing to rush into. It's very hard to stick whiskers back on if you decide later that you wanted to keep them, after all.
I think they're kind of funny, Sinedra said. Funny, oh boy. Before Garion could stop her, she reached out 2 tiny fingers and tugged the soft down on his chin. He winced and blushed again. They come off, Aunt Pole ordered firmly. Oh, Aunt Pole's got opinions. Wordlessly, Dernick went below decks. Everybody's in on this. When he came back, he carried a basin, a chunk of brown-colored soap, a towel, and a fragment of mirror. It isn't really hard, Garion, he said, putting the things on the table in front of the young man. Then he took a neatly folded razor out of a case at his belt. You just have to be careful not to cut yourself, that's all. The whole secret is not to rush. Pay close attention when you're near your nose, Hetar advised. A man looks very strange without a nose. Was that a joke? Was that a joke from Hetar? Farmers, let's have him shave in front of everyone. Shaving by committee. The Sharky say, poor guy. Yeah, just absolutely everyone weighing in on this. The shaving proceeded with a great deal of advice, and on the whole it did not turn out too badly. Most of the bleeding stopped after a few minutes, and, aside from the fact that his face felt as if it had been peeled, Garion was quite satisfied with the results. I like the way that's phrased. Like, it doesn't question if there was bleeding. It just says that most of it stopped after a few minutes. Most of it. Sharkies say, I do like how this series wildly swings between super important world-changing events and super mundane life. Yes, I agree. That's why I appreciate that it's set over 5 books. I feel like it feels like there's more space to have the daily lives. That's also why I like a lot of TV series more than, I mean, not in every case, but frequently more than like movies, is because you get, more time for like people's daily lives. You get to, especially in like science fiction or fantasy settings, you get to explore the world a little bit. Yeah, you get like little details about how people in this world spend their days. Much better, Aunt Pole said.
He'll catch cold in his face now,
Barak predicted. He'll catch cold in his face. Will you stop that? She told him. The coast of Nyssa slid by on their left, a blank wall of tangled vegetation, festooned with creepers and long tatters of moss. Occasional eddies in the breeze brought the foul reek of the swamps out to the ship. Garion and Sinedra stood together in the prow of the ship, looking toward the jungle. What are those? Garion asked, pointing at some large things with legs slithering around on a mud bank along a stream that emptied into the sea. Crocodiles, Sinedra answered. What's a crocodile? A big lizard, she said. Are they dangerous? Very dangerous. They eat people. Haven't you ever read about them? I can't read, Garion admitted without thinking. What? I can't read, Garion repeated. Nobody ever taught me how. That's ridiculous! It's not my fault, he said defensively. She looked at him thoughtfully. She had seemed almost half afraid of him since the meeting with Chamdar, and her insecurity had probably been increased by the fact that, on the whole, she had not treated him very well. Her first assumption that he was only a servant boy had gotten their whole relationship off on the wrong foot, but she was far too proud to admit that initial mistake. Garion could almost hear the little wheels clicking around in her head. Would you like to have me teach you how? She offered. It was probably the closest thing he'd ever get to an apology from her. Would it take very long? That depends on how clever you are. When do you think we could start? She frowned. I've got a couple of books, but we'll need something to write on. I don't know that I need to learn how to write, he said. Reading ought to be enough for right now. She laughed. They're the same thing, you goose. I didn't know that, Garion said, flushing slightly. I thought... He floundered with the whole idea. I guess I never really thought about it, he concluded lamely. That's cute. Sharky say, after shaving off his beard, Mr. almost wanted to wear a scarf. A cloth mask would have been nice, used before the pandemic. I mean, I don't think that Garion had much of a beard in the first place. I don't think it was offering much protection from the cold. What sort of thing do we need to write on? Parchment's the best, she said, and a charcoal stick to write with, so we can rub it off and write on the parchment again. I'll go talk to Dernick, he decided. He'll be able to think of something. Good call. Dernick is almost objectively going to be the best choice for this. Dernick suggested sailcloth and a charred stick. Within an hour, Garion and Sinedra were sitting in a sheltered spot in the bow of the ship, their heads close together over a square of canvas nailed to a plank. Garion glanced up once and saw Aunt Pole not far away. She was watching the two of them with an indecipherable expression. Then he lowered his eyes again to the strangely compelling symbols on the canvas. His instruction went on for the next several days. Since his fingers were naturally nimble, he quickly picked up the trick of forming the letters. No, Sinedra said one afternoon. You've spelled it wrong. Used the wrong letters. Your name's Garion, not Belgarion. He felt a sudden chill and looked down at the canvas square. The name was spelled out quite clearly. Belgarion. He looked up quickly. Aunt Pole was standing where she usually stood, her eyes on him as always. Stay out of my mind, he snapped the thought at her. Study hard, dear, her voice urged him silently. Learning of any kind is useful, and you have a great deal to learn. The sooner you get the habit, the better. Then she smiled, turned, and walked away. The next day, Greldick's ship reached the mouth of the River of the Serpent in central Nyssa, and his men struck the sail and set their oars into the locks along the side of the ship in preparation for the long pull upriver to Sthis Tor. Farmo says it's a good bonding and time-spending activity. Sinedra probably isn't able to do much to help with the ship, so it's probably a good way for them to keep busy. Interesting thing about her name is it's like that. Not that, you got it right, it's just missing an apostrophe and a capital. Which I imagine has something to do with Tolnedra, right? I don't know if the CE... Oh, maybe autocorrect gotcha? No, you didn't spell it wrong. I was going to spell it. Yeah, it's CE apostrophe. Just like I typed it in the chat. Can you not see it? Right? Okay. Yeah, then you spelled it right. Just No, I just was wondering. I was just saying how I was going to type clearly. Yeah, no. I wonder if I doubt that the apostrophe is intended to be pronounced. I don't think it is, but maybe it is. Sharky say just noticed that the chat is a touch faster than the video, so we saw the fully typed word before you saw. Yeah, that makes sense. This is like, because I can see, I've got on the left side of my screen my streaming program, which has the video, and then on the right side of my screen, I've got the stream up in a window, so I can see how much lag I've got, and then it's possible that yours is maybe even a little bit later than that. So it's definitely like lagged behind. Farmo says, yeah, I hear him before you guys do as well. Yeah. All right. So that brings us to, it's 11 after 8. We're on page 260 and chapter 24, which is about 8.5 pages long. It was like you were reading the future. But what was I going to say? Probably works better with a shorter sentence. Oh boy. So, what do people want to do? Should I keep reading? Should I read the next 8 to 9 pages, or should we stop there for tonight? As they prepare for the long pull upriver to this tour. Saw the full sentence as I said the word but. Sharkies think we should stop. It's midweek. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. So, not Aunt Pole's best representation so far. She is too eager for Garion to be Belgarian. It feels like. She is not giving him any time to come to terms with any of this, really. But a positive interaction between Garion and Sinedra is nice. And another brief exchange with the dry voice in his mind. And everybody has opinions about him shaving. Everybody. I guess we didn't have Greldick weigh in, but I think of their core party, everyone who was present weighed in. Sharkies wonder if the way the magic is manifesting in Garion is not usual either. Maybe he's feeling it more traumatically than others do. Well, we have not heard about the first time that Aunt Pole used magic. We have heard about the first time that Mr. Wolf did. I think that's the only other example we've got to go off of. They have said that it frequently manifests with strong emotion, I think. But in Mr. Wolf's case, he was just frustrated with a big rock that he wanted to move. So, definitely does not sound quite so traumatic. And from what as far as I think, based on just extrapolating the circumstances, I'm guessing that Aunt Pole's was probably not so traumatic because I think she probably learned pretty early on, probably in a pretty safe space. So, yeah, I would guess out of the three of them, Garion's is probably the most brutal, I guess, and traumatic. But yeah, it does kind of seem like she's focusing on the you're Belgarian now, you've got to learn magic, and not at all focusing on the you just killed a man in a stressful situation, even if he was your enemy. She just is kind of completely glossed over that part of things. And then when he brings it up, like, did it have to be fire? She's like, well, that was your choice. So, yeah, she's not being her best, I think. And I don't know if there's a reason for that, if she has something specific in mind, but also Mister is getting rapidly booped in the calf by Stormy's nose. Looks like feeding time. All right. Well, have a great night. Of course, I'll be back here on Friday. So we'll see. We'll probably see a little bit more of Nisa when that comes around. So Pole's reaction could be that it's been too long for her. I don't know. I see the magic part of it. I don't think is the problem. It's the circumstances specifically. If Garion had learned in a more peaceful manner, I'm sure he'd be thrilled. Well, I'm not sure, but he'd probably be thrilled. But he's kind of seeing himself as a monster. It could be that Garion has like an emotional migraine. And for most, it's just a headache. Pharma says it's also just a lot at once. I mean, if you think about it, like, if you put yourself in Garion's position, but take out the magic entirely. Someone is threatening the lives of you and all your friends, and you grab a torch and you set them on fire and then you watch them burn. And also, for some reason, you have to hold the torch on them the whole time in order to make sure that they don't, kill you in response. That would be pretty rough. That would be a bad time. And I think that's more of the problem than how the magic works for him. Is that literally he burned a man to death and, like, it was an active process. Like, he's got it tied up with the magic in that he used magic to do that. Chucky say he also kind of saw Pole as a monster the first few times he saw her use magic too, so I'm not convinced that he'd be as thrilled even if his first time was less traumatic. Yeah, I mean, he was also unraveling at that time that she wasn't just Aunt Pole, the normal cook, right? That she was Polgara, who's been around for 4,000 plus years. And so I think he felt a bit betrayed by that, right? Not to mention that she kind of acted coldly toward him at that time. He's just some boy kind of thing. And everyone was all of a sudden treating her differently. So again, he had a lot to unpack at that time with just, this is not the person I thought it was. Pharma says, no one is talking about it, and the only person who will talk about it with you is just like, get over it. His whole sense of self has changed violently. Pharma thinks it's all of it altogether. Yeah. Yeah, and the speculative glances from his friends, things like that. Dernick seeming afraid. Good, solid Dernick. But at least Dernick helped him shave. It was nice about that. Maybe that's part of why everybody all jumped in on the shaving thing. I mean, I kind of think they would anyways, but maybe they were more enthusiastic than normal because it was like a normal event, right? It was just an everyday kind of thing, like, he's got a shave for the first time. He's human like the rest of us. All right, well, I'm gonna go have some leftover ramen. Ah, yes, this is something I know about. Sharky say, things have been awkward, but here's something we can help with. Yeah. I'm going to go have some leftovers. I hope everyone has a lovely evening and a nice rest of the week. And I'll see you Friday night. And we'll learn what's to come in Nyissa. Have a great evening. See you then. Bye-bye. Good night. Ta-ta. Toodaloo. Sayonara.